Well, hello, friends, neighbors. John, your whiskey neighbor here, and tonight is another special Tuesday night. With me, I have Scott from MadLab Distillery, or is it Mad Laboratories? I should clear that up right away because I've seen it both ways, Scott.
Either
How should
either
I call you?
either way, Mad Lab, Mad Laboratory, whatever you feel like saying. I'm pretty easy that way. Most people are too lazy to say the full name, so Mad Lab is fine.
Well, sure enough, and MadLab, is right here on. Yeah, I said MadLib. Sorry, MadLab is right here on your bottle. That is the right branding, and I'm just so thankful that you're here with me tonight. You know, I'm one of the things that I've been really curious about this year, and that's what kicked off this series. Thank you for joining me. But about every 2 weeks, I'm having someone in Canada. Right now it's just been Alberta and BC, but I got a couple of Ontarios that are coming on later because I want to know more about, like, what does it take to start up a distillery, or what does it take to get into the creating and sharing whiskey business? Because I'll tell you, I know how to taste it, but I have no idea how to really get it going and start it up. So how did you get into whiskey?
Well, knowing how to taste it is kind of the first step, right? I mean, that's you have to like it to want to get into it. I kind of started my journey. I worked in hospitality since I was 19, so started working in bars. Did that for quite a long time. The hospitality management for good solid decade, anyways, and really kind of grew a love for single malt whiskeys specifically, but like all kinds of different spirits. I really enjoyed them. And it's funny, the story of how I kind of got it all started. I actually like to tell people because I actually have a crystallizing moment that I remember a couple of different stages along the way where I was like, okay, this is the direction I need to go now. You know, like many of our mutual friends, started off with a little bit of home distillation action way back in the day, which is pretty common. And like I said, I know some of our mutual friends that you and I have talked with started off the same way. I don't know how much we all really talk about it, but that's how you can tell a real good distiller is that they kind of hone their skills on a small scale for a long time before they jump the gun into the big world. But yeah, I remember I was 20 and a lot of my friends were getting into craft beer. They were getting into brewing, like home brewing beer, doing all grain brewing and that sort of thing. And I dabbled in that, and I kind of got bored of it really quickly because I'm like, everybody's doing this. It's cool. It's great products. I love it. But it's like, there was this whole like social group of people around me that was like just super passionate about it. And I was kind of like, okay, that's a little too popular for me now. And then I just remember thinking, making whiskey, making spirits, like in the grand scheme of things, can't be that hard, right? Like, and it's challenging in a lot of ways. Like any art form, it's like painting's not that hard. Well, no, painting's not that hard, but making a good painting is, more difficult. But no, I just realized that, the length of time that whiskey and other spirits have been produced, it has to be a skill you can learn, right? It's like churning butter. If you want to make your own butter, you can learn and you can do that. You can't learn to make your own iPhone. It's just not really a thing you can do. So anyways, I realized it was a learnable skill, and I just started teaching myself, and that's kind of how the passion at that whole side of it started. And just a long journey of a lot of trial and error, and trial and error and on and on and on. So.
Scott, that's awesome. I should set the stage a bit as people are coming in, and I do know that some will know MadLab. They'll have seen it. They maybe have had it. It was just phenomenal.
So.
But a number of my viewers, because I'm based here in Alberta, but we met at around BC distilled time. I was invited out to just kind of hang with you guys, and wow, what a great experience, by the way.
A lot of fun. A lot of fun that night.
It was. And what was cool to me coming in, not a distiller, not having walked the path, is what felt like camaraderie, what felt like helping each other out, what felt like, we're in this together. We believe in craft. We've got, BC grain. We're doing it here in BC. We're really supporting the little guy and the supporting local. And I love that. And so that's where we met. So I maybe should paint that picture for the group. That's how I got to know you, and I appreciated that night. That was really a lot of fun. But tell me, if you mind, a little bit about, being a BC craft distiller. That ties your hands, but it can also be, a supportive group. What's it like being a craft distiller in BC?
It is sort of, above all, it's a supportive group. You could tell by that. You were at that event that night. It was like that party. We could have kept that going for a week because everyone was just so engaged and so like we had that full bar set up there. And the cool thing about it is, with that particular group, it's not, oh, hey, let's just go have a drink. It's like, no, take me to the bar and show me what you're making. What did you bring to the party? I want to try your stuff. And you chat to someone new. Oh, you're from here? Okay, well, bring me to the bar and show me what you brought today, because everyone brought something, and it was sort of a BYOB sort of situation. And that was all it was for me. It was like I didn't really have any interest in having a drink unless it was somebody, I was sharing with somebody that I'd talked to, or I'd, experienced them, or we'd been to events together and stuff. So yeah, there is a ton of camaraderie. I hear a lot of people talking about having your hands tied with our restrictions and stuff, but I think, it really is what you do within the restrictions. I think having, like, obviously I would love it if we were completely unrestricted and we could do whatever we want. That would be ideal. There's no question, but personally, I always thrive with a challenge. I always thrive with, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. I'm like, okay, well, what can I do? And I think that is, whether or not we all enjoy, I wouldn't say I enjoy having it, but it's like it's a good challenge to me, right? Like, people say, well, you can't make this, you can't make that. It's like, okay, but I'll make this the best I possibly can. I'll make this the best way, and the way that I want.
And as obviously not just a happy consumer of the products you create, but not as a distiller, my understanding is a little bit around with craft distilling. What I tried to say, like that core product, like the grain work, the malt you got here, the distilling, the aging, all of that has to occur like from BC, within BC, and that creates some problems with craft distillers in the sense of if you wanted to go out and do peated, although. Is there new peated? Like, is anyone peating malt in BC?
No one's peating malt. But again, so this is something like I just mentioned about, the restrictions that we're having and how that's created sort of innovation within the market is, nobody has a peated malt that we're using right now. But Odd Society is a good example of someone that took the techniques that's the one. And what they did is they used a technique where they actually took, and again, it's, and I personally love, it's like a puzzle for me. It's like, okay, what are the laws exactly? And okay, if it's exactly this, that means I can do this little thing over here that they don't kind of tell you. And that's what the folks at Odd Society did, and it was fantastic, is they took the peated malt and they put it in their gin basket, and they imparted that smoke, that peat smoke, into the liquid that way. It's a different route to get to that place, and it's fantastic and it's creative. And again, it's the idea of, yes, we're restricted, yes, it makes things more difficult, but it also creates and forces us to get really creative in what we want to do. Like I have a couple of smoke expression whiskeys that are not quite ready to come out yet. They're going to be down a little ways. Okay. But they're going to be very different to what is in the market currently. And it's going to be very, by the way, Redbreast 15, I see that on the screen right now. That is my favorite Irish whiskey of all time. And I have a story about that. But having to come up with new ways to create a product ends up creating a new product and a new category. And it creates these different areas that didn't exist before. And that's really like, it's one thing to try to create, we're going to create like an Isla style whiskey. We're going to create this style or that style. And that's fine. You need a starting point. But at the end of the day, we're not in the Isles here. We're not in this region of Scotland or that region of Scotland or any particular region in the United States or whatever. We're in BC. And so we're going to have our own characteristics, our own techniques that become used, I think, largely because of the laws. People talk about terroir often and whether or not there's terroir in spirits. And I think it's not fully defined yet in BC. I think I believe there's terroir in spirits. I don't think terroir in BC spirits has yet been well established, but I think it's It's going to be, and through some of the products that we're planning on releasing in the next couple of years, there's some cool ideas that I think will ultimately come out to be some really uniquely West Coast BC flavors and styles and techniques that are just really going to eventually, hopefully, catch the attention of the global market.
Yeah, I love that idea. I truly do. I was talking to name just right out of my head, but the Broken Oak fellow just out of Grand Prairie, or he's in Grand Prairie, and he's got a Alberta peated malt coming out, a single malt that is like barley grown here. You know, the malting dried over, peat cut from Alberta fields, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. You're not trying to be you are like, this is what we grow here, and I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. You know, people have some good things in their glass, and I want to join them. So I've got this bottle. I haven't had it yet. Why don't you tell us a bit about this? Is a single malt from you.
Yeah.
Just to remind you of what I've got here, it's release 11, 42%. And one thing I just want to say real quick as I open it, is this wood? It feels like wood.
Yeah, it's a wood veneer on the label. We like to tie the wood in. I love simplicity with a little bit of a twist. So I thought that way we could kind of keep the label simple, but it still has that tactile, real texture to it. And then also the fact that I love that each bottle, because the grain, if you look at the grain, and every bottle is a little bit different. So, you know, there's no two bottles that are exactly the same, which I think is
I didn't know that, of course, till I picked it up. In fact, I saw it. And I thought, like you said, it's a fairly simple, bold label, which I'm a fan of. But then when I put it in my hand, I'm like, ooh, this has a feel. Right. But do you have a little bit of your single malt kicking around?
Yeah, I do. No? Yeah, I'm gonna have to step into the other room for 1 second, grab it, and then I will be right back so we can talk about it together.
Yeah, no problem. So, you know, for the people online, I do see a fair amount of Irish drinkers out there tonight. And of course, this is a Canadian whiskey feature. I've got a single malt here from MadLab out of BC. But man, some good drams going on there. Redbreast 15 is phenomenal. I love Writer's Tears as well. Is it the double oak? There's another one that's I think it's a double oak product from Writer's Tears that I really love. And Hazelburn, like anything out of those guys is just top notch. So I appreciate that. Oh, that's yeah, I know. I will take that when I can. And thankfully, I think I've shared a few more good things. If it's not a great thing, I try to carefully say, well, maybe this whiskey isn't as good as it could be. But Redbreast is a favorite of mine. If not the 15, I also do like the Redbreast 12 cask strength quite a bit. It's just a little bit harder to find for me these days. I don't know how it is for you guys, but I think Scott's rejoined me here.
I have, and if you want, I have a quick Redbreast story if you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's go.
And it's one of those ones that's become a favorite of mine because of this. A friend of mine went on this. I guess you could call it a bender of sorts. We went down to Vegas to do for a skeptics conference.
It's a Vegas story. Okay, be careful.
But his parents had a place in Phoenix, and they weren't there. And we said, okay, we'll go to Phoenix for 4 days, hang out, relax at the house, and then we'll go to Vegas. And well, the first thing we did day one was we raided, and his parents are from Ireland, and we raided the liquor cabinet. And the first thing we saw was the Redbreast 15. Pulled that out, and that became kind of the bottle throughout the trip that we brought with us. And you know, we'd have a little bit here, a little bit there, and I think by the end of the trip, we still even just had a little bit left that we just left, and we just like sacrificed to the gods of Vegas and debauchery and whatnot. But no, so like I have this like great sensory memory of the Redbreast 15 of this. We're 8 days total there, and I think we slept about 16 hours. So it was one of those by the end of it, we were real rough, and that's why I think that last little bit, we're like couldn't even look at it. We're like just stay there.
Yeah, exactly, just stay. But you know what? It's interesting, and we could talk about that as a sidebar at some point. But I am a huge I don't know what the word is, fan, proponent, believer in that when whiskey is shared in a context, is shared at an evening, is shared with a certain group of friends, shared as a crazy, amazing trip as you described. It takes on a different a different understanding in my understanding of whiskey, because I have been out with good friends and they've poured me stuff and I'm like, this is the best whiskey I've ever had. Or like, this is so good. And then a month later, I will find that expression and it's good, but it's not the same. I do think that context is part of it.
It gives you that sensory memory, which is always nice. You can have a sip of it 20 years later and be like, oh yeah, that. And I actually, so there's the two more quick things about this, the Redbreast 15.
Sure.
One, about 15 years later, his mom and dad came into a bar I was working at, and I didn't recognize him right away. And he just looked at me, did this angry look on his face. He goes, Scott, you owe me a bottle of whiskey. And I'm like, oh shit, I forgot about that. And he wasn't a big drinker. He was just roasting me on that one. But yeah. And then just this year we did I was doing a whiskey advent with a friend of mine, and the Redbreast 15, and we were tasting it all blind, and the Redbreast 15. And I'm like, oh, this one, like the memory was just right here tickling my brain. I couldn't quite place it, but I'm like, this is such a warming, happy memory whiskey for me. It makes me feel good. And then I looked at it and I'm like, of course, that makes perfect sense, right? That sensory memory was just right in the back there a little bit. It was still kicking around.
That's awesome. So now we both have single malt. I don't know if you have the same batch as me or not, but
I do. Yeah, we got the same one.
Okay. What are you willing to share with our group as we're trying to get to know this whiskey? I know we'll get into nose and taste. That's where we're driving. That's why it's in the glass. But what are you willing to share in terms of, I don't know, how long do you ferment?
I'll go through the whole, I'm willing to share everything. I don't hide anything. There's no secret recipe. There's no guarded secrets of technique or anything like that. It's one of those things, and I'm coming to terms with this more and more the longer I do this, is, again, I'd say, like the analogy I use about painting, like anyone can paint, anyone can make a painting. But it takes experience, practice, time to be able to create these masterpieces, right? And not that this is necessarily a masterpiece, but I think this is definitely miles ahead of what I started with. And I don't think, people ask me in regards to other spirits too, like, oh, what if someone steals your gin recipe? I'm like, do it, fine, doesn't matter. Again, I can show you a picture of a Picasso and say paint it. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it. And also, what's the point in trying to copy something that already exists? You want to create something that's your own. So so about this whiskey. So
talk about, like, what do you want to share? Do you want to share about, is it certain yeast? Is it all a certain specific malt? Or is there a different kind of malts? What kind of cask?
We'll go in the nitty gritty if that's what you and your fans want.
Just a little bit, sure.
A little bit. So we do a few things that are pretty unique at our spot, and I think that really contributes to the ultimate flavor. Some of it was out of necessity, some of it was intentional, and some of it was like, hey, let's try this. Oh shit, that worked really well. Okay, we'll keep doing it that way. Starting from the beginning, we just use 100% BC malt. Which we only had one supplier at the time when this one went down. There's some other options now. So some of our newer barrels that are going down might be different suppliers, different farms, different crops. But at the time it was all the Gambrinus stuff, which pretty much any distillery in BC.
You said it quick, and I'm getting to know Red Shed and a few others here in Alberta, but who was it in BC that was a pretty big supplier of this?
Gambrinus.
Okay.
Yeah. Gambrinus, whatever. But they up in Inverness, so northern BC. We were pretty restricted at the beginning. We weren't using any other grain. We were just we've only ever used single malt end to end, top to bottom. But like a lot, like we mentioned Odd Society before, most single malts that came out of BC, with the exception of Phillips, I think does their own malting. It was at points using the same material. So, and that's the thing we talked about, being restricted is like, we're restricted in the grains that we can use, but you can take 20 BC distilleries that are all using the exact same grain. None of their whiskeys are even remotely similar, right? They're so wildly different. It's like having 10 pizza places and, oh, you guys all use the same flour. It's like, yeah, okay, but there's a lot more to that. There's a lot more. It goes a lot.
Okay. So highlight a little bit more of the process, and I am leading up to at some point, but I want to try the whiskey with you first. But at some point, I'm going to come back with a comment that you and I had that night about copper. But we're going to come back to that. Now,
You're triggering me here. Holy
yeah.
buddy.
I want to hear though more like, do you like, is there a certain level you distill to that would be important for me to know, or is there a certain yeast strain that you like to chase,
So
or should
yeah,
we go into casting?
like with everything that I do, I try to go for consistency and process. Final product with the whiskey, I like it to take its own journey. That has to do mostly with the wood, the barrel aging, and ultimately the blending and how we bottle it. But as far as what we do, we use one grain, we use one yeast. That's it. And then so for yeast, we started with what a lot of so you interject here. You get the ADD brain. I'm going to scatter off in all kinds of different directions.
Sure.
So just rope me back in if you need me to. But one of the things that's a real big identifier of who started off as a home distiller versus someone who came into the industry, got a formal education, is things like the type of yeast that's used. And one of the things that almost all people that started as home distilling that I know pretty much started using a champagne yeast. So we use the Lavin EC 1118. And I think Sons of Vancouver were using the same thing. Probably Odd Society was using the same thing a lot. Like, and the reason for that is when you're coming from that home area is like you don't have the resources to do a lot of temperature control. You might not have that. You might have we're going to do it at this temperature. So that particular yeast has a really big temperature band. You know, it'll ferment as cold as 10 degrees or as hot as 50 degrees. So it's got like that, you're not gonna kill the yeast no matter what temperature it is. And we don't do temperature controls on any of our tanks. It's all atmosphere, pressure, temperature, everything. And then the other thing is that it has a pretty high
yeast, you know, actually getting into that like breaking it down, giving you the alcohols you need. You don't have to worry about getting out of the zone that they're gonna be alive in.
It's a workhorse, right? Like you go in and it's gonna keep doing its thing, it's gonna go. And the other thing with it is it's also got a pretty high tolerance for alcohol. Like it'll theoretically ferment up to like 18% alcohol. So it's got that like high tolerance. So if you do manage to get high gravity in your brew, it'll handle it. So yeah, and then but like as far as yeast goes, we also do something that's unique, and it's weird because in some industries it's common. And like I know several breweries that do a similar technique to this. We've been using the same yeast culture since day one, since we started.
Okay.
So what we do is almost like a sourdough starter. Basically, the yeast. Usually, what I do is we the process has changed slightly over the years, but more or less, we leave at least one tank full until we're brewing, and then basically we drain it into a secondary tank. And then we brew the fresh mash right into there, and then that gets distributed into other tanks from there. So we're using that yeast cake in the bottom. It's like a really big, hearty, like it's an overpitch of yeast.
Now that's not quite the same as a sour mash where they take some of the previous and push it back in to try to control pH, reduce bacteria, that kind of thing. That's
it's not technically, it's not a sour mash. A sour mash is you're taking the spent wash. So once you're finished distilling and stripping your mash, you take a percentage of that and you put it back into your brew for the next one, which is similar to like a dunder pit in rum. Right, like it's similar to the rum production. I do sour mashing from time to time.
I say that like I know anything about rum. I don't. I've read that. Just so you know.
we can chat later when we're talking about something else. We'll make that. I mean, I don't make rum, but I know how to. I have in the past, and it's
okay. Let's. It's ready to rush in now, but now we're like 24 minutes in, and I haven't had any whiskey. So tell me at least a little bit. No, I know we're close to cheering, but at least tell me what the cask is in here.
We start all our whiskeys in quarter cask ex-bourbon American white oak barrels. And what we do on our typical whiskey, we usually do the blending at around the 2-year mark. So at that 2-year mark, we blend 4 quarter cask barrels into a full-sized American white oak ex-bourbon barrel. We also do a couple of things. Is we start the ABV fairly high, and then throughout the year we bring it down gradually. And what that does is that pulls a lot more of the complexity, a lot of the different flavor compounds out of the barrels. So usually just a little bit when it's in the quarter cask, just top it like a little bit every 6 months, just like like half a liter or so, and then once it's in the big barrel, usually we'll do a little bit more over the course of the next however long we keep it in there to bring it down. So that's what this one was. We also will occasionally do single barrel releases, which is just a single quarter cask. But those ones you got to be really careful that you don't over oak them. Even 3 years on a quarter cask is getting up, like it's getting up there as far as the oak.
Absolutely, way more interaction because it's just that the surface area of volume. You got a lot more surface area on the inside of that small cask than in a bigger cask with the volume of liquid, for sure. Yeah.
And then that's one of the things I always tell people about whiskey aging. Is barrel aging. Well, anything, but whiskey is my expertise. It's like raising kids. You can have 10 of them. You can treat them all exactly the same. They're all going to come out totally different. And I still remember the first barrels that we put down. We put down 4 quarter casks, same time, same ABV. They were on the same spot in the rack, even like they were just all together in one pallet. And when we pulled those off 3 years later, we had 4 different whiskeys, like 4 just completely different expressions. So,
it's interesting. You've made 2 wildly different comparisons, but speak to the creative journey and also the you're along for the ride journey. By that I mean the creative. You talked about painting or making and that kind of thing, and how anyone can do the mechanics or mix a recipe, but not everyone's a wonderful chef, and it takes time and skill and practice and a lot of failure to make good stuff. But now you've also shared another part of the process, which is at some point, the exact interaction with that particular wood or that placement in the rick house or your storage container has an effect that is difficult to predict, and then brings in the blending.
Yeah.
So for this one, Scott, just to try to sip before 7:30 is on the nose. I don't know if you want to tell me what I'm getting, or do you want me to just give total first impression?
You give me first impressions. I always prefer blind. Everyone's very suggestible. So I always like to, when I'm tasting, I always blind taste. And I always like to get uninfluenced opinions. So,
well, I want to say, because I've been nosing for about 10 minutes, that it's actually shifted in this journey. Just that's why I don't know if you've seen me rotate the glass. I'm trying to get
it opens up for sure. It opens up for sure. It's something I've noticed with it. You get it's sort of it's just some of the more volatile alcohol is sort of blown off a little bit. That sort of happens like we do when we're blending or we're proofing and stuff. We will let it sit in an unsealed vessel for usually a few weeks, but just like sort of naturally off gassing a little bit of that high ABV. Part of that has to do with the fact that it is still a fairly young whiskey. So if you had something in a barrel for 20 years, all that would have already happened. So that's why that's one of the I've had a lot of people taste it, and that's one of the few things where you can't actually tell that it is a little bit younger is you give it just a little bit of a second just to breathe off, and then it's right where it needs to be. So and you saw I cracked this bottle right now as well.
Yeah. So some of that higher alcohols that I definitely, when people talk about bottles opening up, for me, it's that first part as well, just to sort of, I don't know whether you call it high alcohols or whatnot. It just needs to breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like comparable to what like the 4 shots would be. So it's more like intense, harsh chemicals, so the volatiles.
But this nose already took me a little bit in a journey, because when I first went into it, it wasn't quite so much opening up like that alcoholic. Yeah, it's a little young still. It's 3 years for sure. But it actually first spoke more. That's why I was curious if you'd done anything with cask. It was speaking almost like a nuttiness, a roasted almond, and something was going on in there. And then it's shifted a bit now into some sweeter things, right? So now I've got a little more vanillas. I got a little more, a little more of those higher sweetness, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it started there in the almost roasted almond, and that's mostly gone now. But that was my first impression, so that was interesting.
Yeah, and that's just something that it's gonna do. It's, and like you think about too, like the other thing about our whiskeys is we don't do any chill filtration. So there is, and I mean, you might get a bottle. Sometimes I get a bottle and look at it, and it's sort of like some of the particulates clumped a little bit, and it's like, okay, give it a shake, we're good to go. But I think that's part of the beauty of especially the small batch craft stuff is allowing it to be that natural. It's pretty much barrel, some proofing, bottle,
and it's got a little more, some fruit sweetness. I don't have the fruit on my nose yet, like maybe a yellow apple, and then Oh, I had a flavor note and now it's gone. But that's okay. I think it's time to cheers and try a little bit of this good liquid, Scott. Thank you for
Cheers.
being here. Cheers, sir.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I actually don't drink all that often, especially compared to what I used to when I was in the hospitality industry. And I even still, you know, I make my own whiskey. I still feel very indulgent, even having my own whiskey. And so it's been like I haven't sat and had a good dram of whiskey for about a week, which is a little. I mean, I've had some tastes, some samples in between, but like actually sat and enjoyed a good sip, and yeah, it was good. It was good. I'm very happy. Makes me very happy.
Yeah, this is a great first sip, Scott. I'm really enjoying this. It's got a little bit of citrus. That's what I was chasing before. But I'm going to say for me today, it's got a little bit of that nut oil that's coming around. It's like a little bit of coconut almost, or something that's kind of kicking around. Yeah.
I'm definitely glad I let you taste before giving you the notes, because the notes that I've gotten from, I didn't pick it up right away, but I had like 3 or 4 people all pull the same note for me.
Okay.
Is peanut butter.
Okay, I could do that. And now you said that, the next tips, that's what I'm going to get. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I didn't want to prime you, because like you had it, you're like almond oil, nut oil. But I'm like, he's dancing around it. I'm
there. I'm in the ballpark.
Right? But I also get like, so again, you know, I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that we do quite uniquely. The one being the way that we use our yeast and the way that we control our yeast. Not a lot of people are doing that in distilling, which is surprising because it's really easy and it gives you this really robust, beautiful yeast culture. Anyways, that's a whole hour-long conversation. But the other thing we do is we run an open flame on our still, which I know I'm the only one in BC right now doing it. I think there's someone else in Canada, but I don't. It's not common. It's very uncommon. And what I find that does is, when you're running that high heat, that flame, you know, people, what they worry about is like hot spots, and they worry about like all these sorts of things and inconsistency and scorching and scarring and burning. But what I find is, because of the type of grain that I'm using, the way it's lagered, it's a filtered grain, like a strained off grain, is you get a little bit of caramelization of some of the unfermented sugars that drop to the bottom. Very light, very subtle, but in the end, and it happens across all of our products. Like even if you tried our premium vodka, you're going to get a little bit of this as well. It's almost a bit of that charring, just a little bit of that charring, and it's not from the barrel. It's actually from the still. So you're getting that charring, toasting notes from the barrel. But even like if you were to try some of my next time I send you something, I'll send you some of the new make. You know, even going into the new make, you're getting a bit of that charcoal, that toasty, that like open, like think about like campfire kind of like just toastiness of the charcoal a little bit. And I think that gives it. So like for this one, for me, the peanut butter, someone else mentioned to me, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely there. I always get a little bit of chocolate, or like toasted hazelnut. The best description I always had for my vodka, and this is like a very clean, version, but you're just getting the notes off of the still, is it's like spreading Nutella on some burnt toast. Like it's that like little bit of charring, a little bit of toast, sweetness, nuttiness. It's kind of, but that character, a lot of that character is coming from the new make spirit. A lot of it's coming from the still, right? Like, and then that's why, like, and now is a good time. We can probably talk about the copper if you want.
Okay. Let me tee this up for a second.
Yeah.
Just for a second. Because I cornered you because someone told me that I should come and ask you the question. They set you up for me to come talk to you.
Oh, because they've been in fights with me about it. That's why.
What? Look, like every distillery I've ever been in, every picture of a whiskey distillery, especially you go to Scotland, you look at all those nice line arms and and they are all copper. And everything that tells me if I were to make whiskey would be a conversation on, I need to more reflux around copper moss. I need more plates. I need more contact with copper. Now, talk to me about how much copper you use in your process.
I use zero copper. I use none at all. And I have a couple reasons. I have a couple reasons for that. And I have a couple. I started off with a thought about it, and I have, like I said, I've gotten into it with some people that are much smarter than I am in chemistry, and have a much better understanding of it. And they haven't told me that I'm an idiot yet. They've sort of like kind of gonna maybe, I don't know, yeah, I don't know. That's sort of what I get from people. But I have a couple things. One, copper is gorgeous. It's beautiful. Love copper. But it's reactive, right? So the main reason and the main thought when building stills, which I also love to do, and I'm sure, I don't know if you mentioned this before, but we built our still as well. So
I didn't yet.
Awesome. I basically took a bunch of scrap parts to a friend of mine who's a welder, and I said, this is how I needed to go together. Here's a case of beer. Can you build it for me? And he did. So but the so couple thoughts. So the thought is that copper leaches sulfates out of your spirit, which are obviously bad. You don't want it.
Right.
Can you detect any sulfates in this whiskey at all?
No.
I've had some professional master blenders and people that were in charge of large sensory panels taste through my spirit, and they said they're not getting any sulfur. And they were like really, really, really hypersensitive to it. And they said they were going through all my products, said not a single bit of sulfur in any of it. So it has to do, you can remove sulfur through various techniques, through your mash, through how you're running your still, how you're stripping, all kinds of stuff like that. But that's not the main issue that I had. The main issue that I have is when you're talking about copper leaching sulfates. First of all, you think of your head on a whiskey still, right? Yeah. On a traditional Scottish whiskey still. Sure. It comes up here, shapes. So the idea is that it's funneling all the vapors up into here. It's getting a bit of reflux coming down on the side. The only place that it's going to be actually leaching the sulfurs is where it physically comes into contact, right? So it might grab it, and then some of it will get pulled back down, grab it, and some of it will get pulled back down. Yep. Cool. Okay. All the way through the line arm, through the cooling coil or whatever they're using. Same thing. Sure. Now, so that's my first issue is, okay, how much really is it leaching? Like, we know that copper does leach it, but is it getting the right contact, enough surface area to actually make a huge difference? I'm sure it makes some difference. I don't think it's not important at all.
Okay, keep going. But I feel like where we're headed is it could make some difference. It does pull some sulfates, but you can do it through other process. Are other people just lazy in their process? So they're using
if I were to just boil it down, I'd just say it's overstated. The effect of it is overstated. It's, you have to have copper. You don't have to have copper. Sure, it probably helps. Great. I'm sure it makes your product a little bit better. Whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, I've had stuff made from lots of copper stills that tasted like absolute hot garbage. So it's like in the level of priorities, it's well below the screen.
I just wondered if by now you decided to put some copper moss packing somewhere in the still, or
no interest in it at all.
Copper worm tub, something.
A lot of what I did too when I built my original setup is out of necessity. It's like, this is what I'm going to build, this is what I have, and then there were some things that I had planned that I never executed. But I was doing it. I'm like, you know what? My spirit is coming out so good. I'm so happy with everything that comes out. Nice. I'm thrilled. If it's working, don't mess with it. It's like there's not that improvement that I was looking to make. I was like, this is already well beyond what I was expecting, what I was hoping. But yeah, and then the one last thing about the copper. Well, two other things about the copper, real quick. We talked about how much surface contact it actually gets. The other thing is how much can it hold, right? Like how much? Like at what point does that copper become bloated with the sulfates? Yeah, you're using heavy caustics to strip it out, but I also don't like to do that either. So by using stainless, I don't need to use heavy caustics when I'm cleaning. I only do steam clean. That's it. It's either scrub physically, steam clean, and that's it, right? Because I don't want anything other than mash, spirit, or water into my still ever. Obviously everyone cleans well, but there have been incidents where we've had recalls on spirits because something that probably was a not properly rinsed cleaning cycle could do it, or just something got hung up and caught in a certain part of the still that didn't clear out properly.
Right. And in your still, you can say, I'm not using any of that stuff. So we're not getting any recalls for your stuff because it doesn't have any of the caustics anywhere
coming across. No. So, but yeah, so it's got it. So it's, yeah, like I said, I don't dislike copper. It's just like, how do you put something that's so overstated? Because that's the way it's been done. That's the way everyone in Scotland does it. Oh,
and
that's
it's
what
not just like you're right. It's beautiful, and as I
gorgeous.
described, the imagery that you see, or like if I were writing a whiskey magazine, I have some, but not right with me.
Yeah.
It's going to have beautiful pieces of copper somewhere, like
Gorgeous,
absolutely
gorgeous, stunning,
Yeah.
stunning. But no, and then the thing people that ask me if I would put any copper into my system, the only and this is like completely backwards for what the conventional wisdom is the only thing that I would build copper into my system is my boiler. And now the reason that's counterintuitive is because you're not getting any sulfate leaching from that. The only reason I would go copper on my boiler is because it's got better heat transfer.
Sure.
And it's got a little bit more malleable. So like I've had to replace a boiler because the stainless eventually cracks and you have to pull it out and stuff. But copper would have a little bit more give to it and just better heat transfer. So that's literally the only reason I would go copper.
Transfer would happen more efficiently or whatnot. Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't give you a heads up that I was going to ask that, but you probably had that in the back of your head that I might bring it up.
You just triggered me and I go off about it. That's the way it happens.
So I will say I am really enjoying this, and I don't think I've been fully. I resonated more in another note when you mentioned roasted hazelnuts more than peanut butter right now, and it's maybe because I'm kind of a Jim Beam fan, and if I'm going to do some peanut brittle and peanut business, I'm somewhere in Booker's or whatever. Like I've got that going on, and I'm not getting that in your single malt here. I do have a roasted nut note, and that's staying through the conversation. It is, and it's a welcome, nice nut oil, like a coating, and I appreciate that. So. So, hey, you know what? As I said, a number of my viewers are actually across the coast, a couple here from Ontario, whatnot. What markets are you in? Are they going to find your whiskey?
So we're only in stores in BC. We haven't exported to any liquor boards outside of BC. But if you do want to order some, you can order off our website, or you can even just call me up and place an order that way. We are shipping across Canada, and then we're doing free shipping on orders over $150. So get 2 bottles, it's free shipping. We don't ship a lot across the country, but we've get a handful of orders here and there that go all the way back east. It's something that some of the provincial liquor boards are really pushing it back against, but and I've had some distilleries tell me that, we're not allowed to ship, and it's like, really? I mean, I'll ship until they tell me to stop.
Exactly.
My liquors, the person I deal with about our liquor board, when I asked them, can we ship across country? She said, yeah, as long as the sale is processed in BC, you can ship across Canada, no problem. So you just got to pay BC tax. That's all. That's the bummer about it.
True, but certainly I know a lot of not distilleries, although yes, distilleries, but because I'm blessed in a province that has a good access to whiskey and decent prices. A lot of people that I talk to will order bottles from stores here and get it shipped across the country. They're doing it open and above. It's on their website. It's not like an underhanded deal. And that's but like I know a lot of distilleries are getting they're getting grief about shipping into Alberta, I think is the issue. I don't know what really?
I know I've talked to a few distilleries and it's I don't know if they had trouble shipping out of Alberta or into Alberta and they got in trouble for it, but I don't think whatever. It's Canada. We should be able to ship anything across Canada.
Totally agree. And the good news for anyone tuning in here is that you do ship across the country. I do have a couple of US viewers in here, and I don't think we're international yet, but
we're not international. I know some people that have had some stuff shipped down there. And I always tell them, if I'm going to pack it and ship it, if it gets stopped at the border, that's your problem.
Exactly.
Because it's not strictly above board. So, it's one of those things where.
Yep. No, I hear you. Now we've talked through the single malt. This is batch 11. I don't know if you have more of this in stock to be ordered or if it's a next batch.
That's if you order online, that's the one that we have. We also have a little bit of, we have a whiskey mix pack that we sell. It's 50 ml bottles. It's a cask strength from number 8, number 7, which is our gold medal winner, and a bottle of new make. And so that's one that's a fun little pack that people can.
Yeah, because you kind of get I actually really like tasting new make, like just to get a sense of this is sort of how we started. Yep. And then get a sense of how it's changed with time or casking or whatever. Yeah.
So and it's nice too to have 2 different expressions of the same whiskey, and it gives you that idea of like you know, like I said before about, you know, the barrels behaving so differently and doing what they want to do, you know, 7 and 8 are totally different whiskeys. They were made exactly the same way, same type of barrel, same liquid went in, same ABV, everything, just different barrel. And that really makes a wild difference, right? So
anything that you want to forecast a bit for people that are getting a little curious about MadLab, like it's coming, you don't want to release it, but you're thinking, you know, this might be coming.
We have an I just have to finalize. It's sort of a collab project. Just waiting to finalize that. Hopefully this week, and I'd like to get it in. It's in a tank. It's pretty much ready to bottle. I just have to get the finals of the logistics and the labeling done. But if I can get that, I'd like to get that out before the end of the month. There's a really unique finish whiskey, which globally it has been done, but not in any scale. So I'm very curious to see how it. The samples I've tasted are amazing. I've tasted some people off; they're really impressed.
Nice. Okay.
It's something just a little different, you know, just like me, just a little.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't look close enough, you might not notice. But for those who are watching, they're gonna see that something's up. And then a little bit further down the line, we will start looking into some different smoke expressions. But that's don't hold your breath on that one. That'll be a ways out. So enjoy the liquid that comes out now, because it's still you know, we're just still so thrilled with every drop that comes out.
Needs a little more time. Hey, I did have a question here. One Woman's Whiskey has asked, just in general, like either your production run or the number of bottles produced, can you give us a sense of what you're producing?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do some math real quick here. It's been fluctuating over the years a little bit, depending on demand for other products. You know, in 2022 we had a big LDB strike here, so we had to focus a lot of our production on like vodkas and gins and stuff to meet those needs. But I would say, you know, our average production now, we're making about sorry, I'm calculating here. You know, get roughly about 300 bottles per month is sort of the average production. So not that high. So when we release a whiskey, it's sort of like, okay, here it is. It's here while you got it. That, of course, goes up and down depending on what we're doing with other products. But there's a few other sort of, won't necessarily go into it here, but there's some other little interesting things we do with our whiskey production. But that's a little too deep of a knowledge. It's wait for the distillers to come ask me on that one.
Sure. That sounds good. That sounds good. You know what, Scott, I really enjoyed my time, and I appreciated all of you guys who have tuned in, shared a bit what's in your glass. I appreciated the questions or sharing back and forth. And if you want to hit up, you know, is it madlab.com, or how do I find your...
You can do madlabdistilling.com, or if you want to do the social media thing, it's at MadLab Spirits. So we do a lot of stuff in Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. So we're pretty much constantly putting stuff up that we're doing, and some of it's entertaining and some of it's not, and whatever but it's there. You can find it. And if you message there, it's gonna come to me. So if you want to ask me any questions, by all means, you can hit me directly there or whatnot.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again, Scott. Thanks for everyone who joined us here online. Hope you guys have a good night. And certainly the flavors that are coming off this whiskey out of BC is just worth checking out. So see if you can get a dram in your glass. Yeah. Cheers.